I see people coming back slowly but surely. Okay, last but not least, we're about to launch the fourth and last panel of the day. So let me welcome on stage Edouard Peurichard, Dries Vanwalle, and Mathieu Despoisse, as well as Vincent Béraud, who will moderate the fourth panel. This time the panel will be in French, so people who need translation, you can go get a headset. And the title is Preparing the Reformulation of a Circus Performance from Moral Agreement to the Toolbox, a Generous and Sensitive Adventure. I lost a word in my document. Thank you. Enjoy.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous.
Well, good afternoon once again. We will start this fourth panel discussion and second panel discussion linked with this digital soul protocol. Many topics were addressed since this morning. This panel discussion will start with a short film, 10-minute long film. And if Eric Bordelot is still with us online, you saw him this morning, with Léné Vollard, they made this film. It's a meeting with Guy Carraud, and this establishes a link with the circus repertoire, and in this film we see questions that the artist raised in the 90s already. Perhaps I've said too much. Can you hear me? Yes.
Comme Vincent,
Well, Vincent has almost said it all. This film has a touch of serendipity, as you will see. We were fortunate with the co-director of this film. She worked on the cutting, and we also have our beloved venture philanthropist. She was able to get sufficient funding to create those performances for the Sphere. And in this film, we establish a parallel with what we initiated, those derivative processes, and we saw that Arca House were very much interested in those topics. So we're delighted to present this film in this very conferences. I think it is very adapted. If I will stay online, if you have questions at the end, or I will leave the stage to our panelists to talk about the repertoire and reviving pieces.
Est-ce que c'est ça? Non, ça je recule, ok. Là j'avance. Ah, on est pas mal. Et là je le fais.
Archaos, parce qu'il y avait art et chaos, mais aussi parce qu'archaos c'est comme archaïque, et ça veut dire, ça peut vouloir se traduire par celui qui arrive le premier à le savoir, donc le pouvoir. Et la coïncidence, c'est que nous on voulait un mot qui commence par la lettre A pour être en début des listes. C'est drôle, hein?
dans cette idée du premier, il y a l'idée de l'archive aussi, non?
Alors, l'archive, pas
Let's see if we can perhaps look at this film at the end of the panel discussion. So this film was aimed to give us a little context as to the subject of this panel discussion, but what is the aim of this discussion? During the Digital Soul Protocol, we are going to support a cycle of production of reimagined work, reformulated works. There are many ways to say this. And we've had discussions with quite a number of artists on these issues, and the three artists in presence were part of this discussion. So to give you a little background as to what we are going to discuss here today, it's a continuation of that previous discussion. So I would like to introduce you our panelists. Gender parity has been abided by here. Joke aside, it was the case throughout the day. I have to say it. So Edouard Peurichard, I'm not going to discuss at length your career. It's impossible, right? But let's say that you were a laureate, a winner of Circus Next a couple of years ago. 2023, and we've seen several of your shows for a number of years. There's the Repos du Guerrier, and also a project you set up within la Supérette, which is called Nous n'avons rien vu venir, which is also a revived work. Welcome, Dries Vanwalle. You are part of the Cecil project created by your company, and you question the notion of reactivating works, and Mathieu Despoisse. There's the project Pling Long, which was created 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, with Etienne Monceau. Both of you are authors and interpreters of this project, and this is more or less what we will focus on with this idea of reimagining works. I have a simple question to ask you. It's a question that is similar to what was addressed earlier in the previous panel discussions. This morning we had people talking about their experience on revisited works, and here we have people who are thinking about doing this revisiting process. So there's this entire trajectory to undertake. So the question is, why do you want to revisit a piece of a particular repertoire? What interests you in that process? What are you still wondering about? Where does this motivation comes from? So Edouard, I think, wants to speak first. Well, let's say that my latest creation, called Nous n'avons rien vu venir, is a show we created a year ago with the Cirque Portatif. So the Cirque Portatif is a call for project by the Very Dalles. And this creation was made to be shown everywhere, in museums, in schools, all sorts of spaces, all spaces that are inside. That's an important aspect of this work. So, nous n'avons rien vu venir. Maybe I should talk about this particular performance, this particular show. It's quite difficult to talk about it. You have the circus and digital arts at the very heart of this show. We have a green screen as a background, as you have in the movies, to have special effects. And during the show, we have live streaming on a screen next to us. So it's an interplay of using circus techniques differently. We can do acrobatic cycling very fast on the highway in crazy positions, but obviously the audience sees that it's a fixed bicycle sorry, and we're not taking any risks here. So this is a way to experiment with circus forms we dreamt of doing on stage, that were possible with digital means. So there's an interview with Fellini, where Fellini was wondering why no one would go and see his movies, his films in the silver screens, and this is because television was invented, and people would rather see films at home rather than at the cinema. But he still said that there was a future for cinema, that TV could not replace cinema, because it's a question of format. The silver screen is so big that people come to see gods, people that are above us, gods and goddesses, whereas television reduces the image, and what we see is people that are on scale. And Fellini thought it wouldn't interest anyone, but Fellini is no longer among us, but today the image has been miniaturized so much that we can use it or look at it on our mobile phones, and perhaps we change that relationship. We are the gods, goddesses, manipulating a world to bring that world closer to our own image. And I'm talking at length here, and I still haven't answered your question, I'm afraid. And it's also because we didn't see the film we were supposed to show at the beginning of the discussion. Just let me know if I'm too long, but why recreating this piece today? Well, we have the same issue. Mathieu will talk about it with Pling Plong. There was the issue of creating a show that was going to be shown abroad. And there are two of us. Thomas Nartin is my co-creator here, and we wanted this form to be passed on other teams. So we wanted to create a protocol whereby the form will be passed on, but not the content. Obviously, there's the green screen, that's part of the form, but not the content, what is being addressed. What people could do with that work was what was interesting to us. And in a nutshell, there was also a lot of frustration with that project because there was a wall full of yellow stickies with all of these ideas we wanted to display and to experiment with. And we had to sort of summarize all of these ideas because we had only 50 minutes and we didn't want to have any repetitions. So it was also an opportunity to cure that frustration by working with different teams that could, or passing on this content to other teams that could work on variations of that show, iterations of that show, in a way. And perhaps, Dries, you want to add to that?
I will speak in English because it's a bit easier for me, if that's all right. It's a bit of a circle I will make now. We are starting a new creation soon, and when we are creating, you also have the thing that in the end of the creation, you get to like a piece of 2 hours, but you have to make it in 1 hour. So you have to kill your darlings. And it's always really hard to kill darlings because there's always so many cool ideas that you want to keep exploring that fit the concept, but you're like, it's not fully it. So when we're now making a new piece, we thought, how could we keep this and then keep on researching this? So for our newest piece, we had the idea, we take one core principle and we go with an idea. And if another idea comes up, we make a different series, a bit inspired also with Julian Vogel, the China series. It's always like, it continues on the same research, but it's not the same performance, but it kind of is. Anyway, this idea in the end we didn't do because it was a bit hard to write into one concept for funding. But meaning we are very interested in having a core principle, having a piece and seeing what else can come through from it. What else can it get? What else can people get from it? What else can people do with this certain core? But what is now in this case would be with Cécile an existing show, not just like a core principle, but like a full-on show. What could people do with it? We are very interested in finding out also and just like exploring.
Alors nous sur Pling.
On Pling Plong, we questioning this issue of reimagining works. There was Vincent is here rather, and we published a guideline so anyone could do this show at home, Pling Plong. So in this guideline, you have all the content of Pling Plong so that everyone has seen the show. I mean, this is for people who have seen the show. And if you haven't seen the show, you shouldn't see it because it's going to spoil it for you. You shouldn't read these guidelines. And few people have sent us videos of themselves recreating this piece. But perhaps it's something that they don't want to share with us and rather share with their friends and family. Why not? Something more intimate. And this is a show we wanted that show to be played everywhere, in theatre stages, at home, but had to be inside. And for this show to be played everywhere, it meant also beyond France. I'm not really good at foreign languages. Maybe it's a French specificity. But I thought that it would be interesting for other people to interpret it, and perhaps in different languages. So listening to your contributions, I see that it is a continuation of the existing show to pursue the creative research process and to give life to these creations in a different way. And this notion of reactivating a piece with this idea of the repertoire, as we addressed it this morning, there's something of a historical continuation, to leave tracks, to leave traces of what was done, created. But you are sort of saying that it's not your first incentive or motivation. Well, it's not my case, Dries, you can answer as well, but when it comes to the performing arts, I like performances and shows, but I appreciate the ending of the show or of the piece. So for me, the idea here, when we talk about the continuation of a piece, for that show, On n'a rien vu venir, it's very adapted to that kind of continuation. There was a will to talk about the web, the internet, because internet is crazy. It's a revolution, which is amazing, and it went very fast. I mean, the last similar revolution we had, it was printing, and this took several centuries in a way, and here in 30 years it's been a fast-track revolution. So we were about 10 years old when the internet happened, and there was a lot of content that we saw, video games, the first social media, text messages, and we had time to really look at these new things that were emerging. And for me, it's interesting to pass on this project to another team with another culture of internet, another experience of the internet. We will do it with a Spanish team. They have different references, a different culture. So what they will show and say will be different, and this is also what is interesting to me. So for me, it's not so much a repertoire piece, but a piece in itself, or a mini-series, maybe.
Same. It's not really to make the repertoire this, but I forgot where I was going. I like if after a show someone comes to us and says, "Oh, it would be cool if you could do it outside and for like 5 hours long." We're like, yeah, it's cool, but our piece is not like that. But maybe it could be an idea to explore. But then it would be cool if maybe someone wants to do that. maybe more that one.
Ok, merci.
Right, thank you. Maybe we can get into the heart of the matter. How do you actually look at this reworking or revisiting? There are different ways to look at it. I'm going to try and leave it very open. How do you go about it? You already mentioned, Edouard, a protocol, but I'm thinking about rules of the game, a sort of framework, and maybe other ideas, because every time I think that the way you refer to this framework is also reflects the way you can see that kind of work. Well, for me, it raises the question of what is the essence of a performance, and every performance is different. Every production is different, so we've tried to target what was really essential to preserve, and that simplifies things and helps you build a protocol. So Pling Clank is a reflection on couples, and we looked at the biggest challenge for a couple, and we thought it was to put together an IKEA piece of furniture, and that was our starting point. And then it sort of unlocked the process for us, and we looked at intimacy, privacy, and we tried to decide what was important to keep, to preserve. So at the beginning of the show, there's a pack with an IKEA piece of furniture inside that has to be put together. And at the end of the show, the piece of furniture has been assembled. So it's a question of looking at our roles and responsibilities. And so we looked at how much time we could dedicate to that. How do we find people who would feel like defending that project? And for us, it became very clear that it would be co-designed with curators and venues that would be interested in it. Whether they take part in the defining of the casting. The idea of people being partners and helping with our creative process and helping with the funding is something that really resonates with me. Well, tell me if it depends on the artists that you find, but there's this question of intimacy in that couple and the text that you wrote for that couple. So it seems to me that there are choices that need to be made. It's not easy, it's true. It takes time to actually delve into that intimacy before you can actually write the text, such as Pling Clang. So we actually decided to go fast together for a whole week, and during the week after the fasting, we went to put together a kitchen, a fitted kitchen at a lady's place, and we did that together. So we wanted to talk about something we've been through, that experience. So I'm not saying you need to do that, everybody needs to do that, but seriously, would you be prepared to share that experience to see if it resonates with people? Well, this is the way we start the conversation with partners to see if they can fund our fasting week or other things. But as far as I'm concerned, if we only have 2 weeks, maybe we'll dedicate those 2 weeks to something different. So the protocol is defined depending on the funding that we get, the resources that we have. For me, it's important that people be remunerated for their work. So we're talking about the reworking of a piece that you need to breathe new life into. So Maybe if we have funding, we can actually go on a biking a journey for weeks and weeks on end. So, well, you've touched upon production issues. I thought we'd keep them separate, but maybe it's difficult not to address them. About the how. How did you go about doing this? Well, just taking stock of where we are, we started with the sort of lab work. So we had teams that were interested in revisiting the work. So we started working as a laboratory without any obligation to come up with a finished product after having viewed the show to see how things are coming together. And what was interesting in this transmission was to bring together artists that do not work in exactly the same fields as us, our virtuosity. And I put that between inverted commas because I told you about the green screen and special effects. And it's juggling. There's also lifts, lots of lifts, bikes, other fields, a little bit of knife throwing and darts. But depending on the artistic team, for example, if we have a duet that's really good at acrobatic lifts, it's great because we can push things even further. There's a bit in the show where we're wearing blue latex suits. What I mean to say is that the type of circus art that is going to be represented in our show will depend on the artists we work with. So things can be realigned. And Idriss Roca is our external kind of advisor working on the protocol and helping me. It's a bit like Dogma with Thomas Vinterberg and Lars von Trier. We came up with rules without being sure that we'd keep respecting them. But at some point you have to let go of the scenography and let the team go on with the work. So there's a laboratory phase, then another phase without us, and a final phase to sum up and refine, fine-tune. It's roughly the kind of protocol that we're trying to build at the moment.
We are at all not as far as anything just been said. We just have been talking about it and thinking about it and a bit dreaming. But for sure, we would want to have some kind of a protocol, some kind of rules that are, we want stuff, some certain ideas or concepts we want in the reprise, and some things we don't want really that much. There's also a big thing about our stage, what is a very big part of our show. I will spoil the show a bit for you now, that the show starts with a flat stage and it goes up in the end and you don't really see it moving. A big surprise. But that influences a lot of what happens in the show and also the dramaturgy of the show. And we are not sure if this has to be in a reprise. We can't give ours because we are still using it. It's also, our show is also still touring, so it's not like we don't want to stop it to do the reprise. And also the idea of maybe having a different circus discipline. We are acro dancers, but it would be very interesting to see jugglers do our show, because the main concept of our show is 3 people walking in juggling patterns, in a cascade, the main juggling pattern. So it could be interesting to see jugglers do it. It doesn't have to be acro dancers, we think. But yeah, so we're just dreaming or imagining or speaking, nothing fixed or concrete at all.
Une question peut-être particulièrement pour Edouard.
A question for Edouard and Mathieu, more specifically specifically because language is important, I think, in the reworking of the production. And what I've heard in what you said is that the reworking will not be in French. Would you agree with that, Edouard? Or not necessarily? Not necessarily, because there's still a possibility. It so happens that, as you said, Mathieu, French people are not very good at foreign languages, and the teams that we work with in Spain, for example, across the border, they speak French as well, so they could actually work on a revisiting but that would still be in French, and that's really interesting. But you have to really be aligned. People will have seen the French-speaking version, so would they take the risk of having a version in another language? We're looking into it, we're thinking about it, and from the logistics perspective, to have the work in another version for the dates we can't secure in France. So I'm thinking about working in another language and in another cultural space. So if as part of the process you derive a lot of pleasure from it, and you realize that you're suddenly discovering a pling-clang that you had never imagined could exist, would you then be inspired to come back to a new French version? Well, for the time being, not many people have voiced their interest, but we hope that people are going to show interest. We don't know yet. I really enjoy performing the same show for a long time. So I'm thinking that if there's no other team performing it in France, we can go on touring. So we said that for our previous work, we went on tour for 10 years. So with Pling Clang, it could go on for some time as well. If there are a lot of other stories that are being built around this putting together of a piece of furniture, why not broaden the scope? But it's still very much at the heart of my thinking and reflection. The revisiting abroad is really interesting to us. Are couples the same elsewhere? Is there the same pressure on them? Can you talk about certain things like bigamy or unfaithfulness with the same degree of freedom in other places? That would be part of the questioning. It's interesting because when you talk about the reworking, you seem to put an emphasis on the script, digital elements, content, and you don't talk about circus art proper, as if the circus performance were not the be-all and end-all of it. How do you relate to that? Well, I think that maybe one of the best ways to revisit Pling Clang would be for table tennis players to actually reinvent it. Of course, that's a bit of a far cry from circus art, but people who are table tennis players and that would be interested in our text, that would be interesting, I think. And in the way you relate to your body in circus art, there is something that is very much being a jack of all trades and being very versatile. But there are other shows that will require some specificity. There's a pitfall in circus art, which is to demonstrate everything that you can do. Well, when you show everything you can do, it becomes very complicated to revisit that work. When you see a juggler who shows all the gamut of his aptitudes and physical tour de force, it can become very much niche. So we're not looking at that. We like the versatility that would match circus art a lot, maybe more than table tennis players, even though physically table tennis players would be a good match. You even told me that it could be actors. Yes, because the text is pretty rich. Does that resonate with you? I just noticed what you said, that you kept a framework that went beyond the mere technical aspects of circus art. Well, in Nous, on n'a rien vu venir, our previous show, sometimes I ask myself, where does circus art start or end? Some people will amplify or reshape certain aspects of the work because of their technique as circus artists. You could actually rethink a television set as a gym apparatus. So it is very technical work that is close to the definition that you could give of circus art technique. So this is where maybe the scenography and the set can become a gym apparatus.
I don't know if what I'm going to answer now is going to answer the question, but it's a bit like what Tim was saying earlier, that is like very much on the border. What this festival is like circus and dance. Our piece is very circus and dance. It can be seen as just dance. People come to us and say like, that's not circus at all. What are you doing here? Like, strange. So I think it doesn't have to be circus at all who does our piece. It could be a dancer. It could be a visual artist or light installation that is with 3 moving heads doing this. It could be anything. I think it doesn't at all have to be circus. Also, like if you really zoom into the circus techniques into Cécile, there's really not so much. I think there's like 2 or 3 actually acrobatic movements, and the rest we're walking or sliding. So I don't know. Then I have the question: what is circus? What is dance? What is movement? What is choreography? Yeah, I don't know if this answers at all, but.
In circus art, I've seen quite a lot of parts being taken over because someone was absent or couldn't fill the part anymore, and we see a new performer become part of a show, and that changes the performance with certain aspects that are going to be better, other aspects will become weaker, but it certainly changes and transforms the way we act and the work itself. But we see that sometimes it's very fast. Someone needs to take over last minute, and there's still the integrity of the work that remains, which is why we realize that we can trust the writing, the work itself. It's really deeply entrenched, and you can rely on it so as to plan for certain parts being taken over. Well, that brings me to the question of how do you see yourselves as artists? This is what it points to. So you talked about a laboratory, you talked about auditions. Who do you invite to the lab? And if it's not a lab, if it's not through auditions, What are the possibilities? How do you find artists that are a good fit, that are a good match? Or sometimes can it come through a third party? I think that's what you said about finding the right partners. Ideally, we don't choose them. That would be ideal. It's because he or she would be so attracted to our project. So that would be the first step. And also that they be recommended by someone who could become a partner in our project. And I see few shows in German, so it will be complicated for me to meet German-speaking artists that would be drawn to my project. So maybe it's best if it doesn't go through me.
If I'm not mistaken, you said something about there was like the last time this happened, there was like love letters. I didn't really exactly get fully how this went, but I like the idea of launching an open call and people writing why they would like to, or what they think is interesting that they could explore in our piece, and what then us like reading them and deciding that's interesting and meeting with them and setting the protocol, setting the rules of what is, or maybe even before saying like this is allowed to, or this is what we want to dive in, and hearing what people could take or could offer towards us. That would be, I think, very interesting to hear.
Nous, dans notre cas, c'est une question qui est pas résolue du tout.
It's a question that remains unsolved. We'd like to avoid organizing auditions because we're not too sure of where we are going. And one of the motivations that I didn't name was just to meet other people. What could be better than an artistic object, to meet other people? There's also the question of the transmission of the work. Who does it belong to? And in my work on Le Repos du Guerrier, I actually plagiarized an artist, Miguel Gutierrez, on stage. Well, I actually had told him, so that was not plagiarism after all. It was more of a tribute that I paid to him since I named him in the show. I am a little bit of a geek in my personal life. I love IT and I love the rationale behind IT. And in particular, open source. ITM, really interested in that, and I'd like to get people to be part of a conversation on that. But it's complicated to actually invite people to auditions because it is a commitment, and if you're not sure of where you're going, if you organize an audition afterwards, you need to deliver. Laboratory is a bit of a fun setup, and you can still decide if you want to go further or not. So it's not solved, it's not been really settled, and I hope the lab will help us settle that question. It is interesting because that brings us back to the idea of artistic direction. Who could actually be at the helm of the revisiting of your work? With the Sphere, we've looked at these questions of copyright and of waiving the rights on a project. So it's a bit like an IT engineer that wrote a few lines of code, and you can actually use them, and I'll be here to support you if you're having difficulty. And of course, in return, you should develop the code so that I can benefit from it. So, which ties in nicely with the idea of speculative generosity that we touched upon before. And anything you'd like to contribute on that?
We have briefly spoken about this only, like not fully in depth yet, but we would like to not be part of the new creation reprise at all, to not influence it in any way, because otherwise we're gonna put too much our stamp on it, and we would like it to be their own piece. So not even like passing by as an outside eye or watching work in progress, but I would love to just in the beginning give the protocol, give the ideas, speak, and then send the people off to their residency, to their workspaces, and then see the final product in the end and see what they took out of it, and then having a chat with them on how it went and what they took, and that way, but nothing concrete in that way.
As far as I'm concerned, it would be quite the opposite, because I think the way we see it is more as a collaborative work. So there would be still something from us that we would contribute and that we'd like people to listen to. And maybe that's very selfish of me, but it makes it possible for me to, and for us to meet artists that are on a different playing field. So we have to imagine that collaboration, so we don't leave it all in their hands and say, okay, bye now. In France, there's something that's actually we have to factor in is copyright. If a piece of work is has some copyright attached to it, you can't ignore it. But it's not the case in all countries. Naively, I thought, oh, that's cool. There are copyrights that we need to respect, and actually it's not that clear. We, in the source code, we know how the story goes. Someone who works in open source and a big multinational like Total that is going to use all the source codes to make business, and there's no protection or remuneration attached to it. It's the risk that has been taken by these people. Yes, about copyrights and protection of a work. That sometimes it has more to do with making sure there's remuneration for the use of that work. I'm thinking of recent events where there's been a suspicion of plagiarism, which demonstrates that protection is often not enough. Well, to protect the financial interests of authors, it does raise a number of questions for me. In a number of works, we borrow quite a lot from what's been done before. So I would dream for things to be quite open and generous in that transmission and that passing on of the work. And if there are countries where it's protected, and others where it's not, maybe respect the choices that are made in different places. And maybe it's about pushing the limits of intellectual property and draw inspiration from open source IT. When I started my work, I had a mentor that helped me because I'm absolutely useless when it comes to IT, so that person could help me on Linux. So it'd be pretty cool if that could still take place.
Author right for us, like it would be as we are imagining it to be a total different piece and not like very much different. We would also think it's very fair that the author rights are not going to us in any way, but fully to the new people making the new piece, because we are not the authors of that new piece. In our heads, it's fully them. So we don't also expect anything to get in return for that.
Okay. Ouais, c'est des situations assez différentes, c'est intéressant. Et, du coup, ça m'amène...
Yes, this brings me to a counterintuitive question. Do you think, in the different backgrounds you've described, do you think that when you reimagine a piece, you are protecting it? If we look at the history of these shows, these performances, you have a second artist or a second iteration of that piece, does that protect the first artist more? Well, if you're saying that performance extinguishes itself when you stop playing it, the more it is shown and performed, the more it has opportunities to stay alive. In spite of the archiving techniques, keeping records, whether it is a simple logbook or else, this doesn't keep a particular work alive. This guideline is intended for people who've already seen the performance, rather than leaving a trace which is not very meaningful to me if it doesn't exist alongside the performance itself. So the more opportunities you have to show a piece of work, the more opportunities it has to stay alive.
Even if it's counterintuitive, but the idea of if the piece A, let's say the first piece, the parent piece, is touring, and another one is touring at the same time, does it protect in a way the first one, or does it put it more in the history? Because there is another one which is completely linked to it with a kinship, which is obvious and really obvious for everyone. So protect the piece or put the piece in the patrimonial.
I think in the case that we are thinking none, it would be two different, like very different pieces. So it would not interfere, I think, with each other. Like piece A and piece B would be able to tour independently without, I think, interfering. Well, it depends, of course, in how strict you make the protocol. But as what we are thinking about, how we are envisioning a protocol on the rules, I think it would be possible that both would independently not influence each other.
Eh bien là non plus, je suis pas d'accord.
Well, I beg to disagree once again. I don't think this approach is going to slow down a particular process. Rémi Lavesne, this magician, it's Lavenne, don't pronounce the S, he's from Toulouse. We trained once together, we didn't know each other. And at the time, I wanted to have a ball act that would disappear in my jacket. It was very amateurish, and Rémi was practicing beside me. He had a show called Deluge, and balls were disappearing in a very professional way, but also with a jacket. So he was looking at me practicing with a lot of interest. And I was quite embarrassed about that situation, but I still went along with my idea and tried to impress him. And he looked at me practicing for an hour, and then he came to see me and he said, "Yeah, not bad, show me your tricks." Your hat full of tricks. And then he explained everything about his act. He opened the jacket, he showed me everything, and he said, "This is the way I do it." It took me 10 years before I could perfect it. And I was surprised. Can you imagine you giving me 10 years of research in 10 minutes? Isn't that a problem to you? And he said, "Well, you know, if I'm doing this, if I do this job, it's because I want it to exist. And if I'm doing magic, it's because I want magic to exist and to go further. So if you earn that time, I'm earning time for my art, and this is my raison d'être, my purpose in life." And that's the very place we're talking about. If we don't sustain our performances, we're losing what we're doing. And this is what is most important, in my opinion. So before moving on to a Q&A, I think we can show the film. It's ready. I just have a feeling, in particular for Mathieu and Edouard, you've talked a lot about the idea of being surrounded by people. Of course, to produce a show, a performance, you need to be supported. At least in France, promoters have co-production resources and institutions as well. But I'm wondering about that. What do you think for this type of reactivating reformulation of pieces? Do we need a larger community for promoters, curators to support you? Because here we're not talking about a standard production project. How does that work? Are there interconnections? Is there something to imagine, invent, perhaps, in that particular space? Well, if we want it to exist, it's all the better if you have many people working within that project. But I express the wish, the desire to do that. If you want for this performance to be played in Finland, if you want Pling Klang to be shown in Sweden because it's close to an IKEA plant, because it's particularly relevant to that project, why not? We are 3 co-authors of that project. So I'm saying I, but I'm talking also about these people who were involved in the creation of this project, but would be happy to go pass on that project elsewhere and to question this societal relationship to the project. But as far as I'm concerned, the most important is to create pieces, and this is what I enjoy doing. And I will place my energy on that rather than thinking about looking for people to pass on my performance. So yes, I'm all for it. And once that's been said, we'll see what happens. And in addition to that, it's a blessing as well to create networks, to have a concrete performance object. It's a way to exchange with an entire network. So it allows you to move forward in terms of collaboration beyond our national borders. So it's a good idea to seize this kind of opportunity because it allows you to create close collaborations with less risk-taking compared to a standalone creative project when you don't know where to get the funding and so on. So here, this is the continuity of a work that has already been done beforehand. So it's good to have people around these objects, works, to reflect on how to cooperate, to work with cross-border countries, and also to reflect on this issue of transmission. So I think, yes, it's great to spend time reflecting on these issues. About risk-taking in particular, I don't know if it's going to work. When I think about Pling Klang, I have no certainty. So here it's a way, I mean, it's risk-taking. So the idea is to see what's going to become of that project.
On peut peut-être prendre quelques questions dans la salle et puis.
Let's take a few questions and show the film just after, which is going to take about 10 minutes. Are there any questions in the room? Yes.
Bonjour, Vanessa.
Good afternoon, Vanessa Sylvie, French Institute in charge of street art, circus and puppetry. So it's not so much a question, but rather a comment. So at the Institute, we are very much interested, Vincent, you know that, interested in the issue of repertoire. A few years ago, there were programs called theatre export, dance export, circus export. And we also support projects to create pieces or to recreate pieces. We had the IF creation project, but with the recent budget cuts, we had to put an end to that project. But in fact, it still exists. Artists can request for support, request for a grant through a specific program. Caroline touched upon that earlier, how she worked with Theatroscope as a cultural attaché. And here it's a collaboration with Balkan artists from the Balkans. So I wanted to ask you if you talk about that project every time you are showing this performance. Sometimes you have promoters. It was the case in at Circa. And I didn't hear anything about that, otherwise I would have remembered it. But that's also what's at stake. The first ambassadors of this desire to do this is for artists to talk about this to other artists, to promoters, curators, and so on. But then there's the responsibility of we were talking about the responsibility of institutions to take a risk. I wasn't able to talk about it earlier. I believe that the role of a particular institution establishment is to continue taking risks so that creation and artists may express themselves more than ever before. So we're all for it. Come to talk to us, especially regarding circus. I can tell you what happened with two artists who benefited from that program. There was Mahosia this morning. She was supported on her project 23 Fragments. Also in puppetry, there was one performance shown in the States. And before that, the very first one, before we had specific programs or projects, obviously artists didn't wait for us, but Camille Boitel had done something similar in Indonesia, and we had supported her in that endeavor at the time.
Peut-être que vous avez envie de répondre.
Perhaps you want to respond to that if they had the opportunity at the end of the show to talk about this type of endeavor. Well, we have a sort of discourse at the end of Pling Clang. We explain our little handbook that we created. So we already talk a lot after the show, after the piece itself. But this, this desire has to come from a group of artists who really want to reactivate a work, to recreate a work. It would be good to talk about it here and there, left and right, up and down, and especially down, because this is how we can bring this to fruition. You have to be the ambassadors of such endeavors, of recreating your performances. Cyril Rossial, I've really enjoyed all the pieces that we've talked about. So I would love to see those pieces again. This afternoon we haven't talked about schools in the broad sense, not only professional schools. What about a lab? What about an attempt to go abroad, or even Dries or Mathieu with Tian and Bram? In these adaptations, what about recreating a piece at the Académie Fratellini? They have duos in creation. I mean, that's an open question. Yes, I would love that. Are there any questions? I do have a very brief question. Maybe the answer will be too long. If we were to continue this discussion and echoing what was said this morning, at the end of the day, in this approach, this protocol itself, couldn't it be a piece in itself? But perhaps you've answered that in a way, because by making a publication in a way, it's a piece in itself, but contemporary art funds are full of protocol, of pieces that are very hard to perform or display, so perhaps the protocol itself could become a piece. Yes. Yes, that's great, because we don't have much time, in fact. we need to wrap up after this. It's very interesting, because Boris Charmat also used to say that any pedagogical action is a piece in itself, a work, an artwork in itself. And Jérôme Bell as well, we talked about them this morning. Jérôme Bell made a piece that is passed on via Zoom. And this is not the piece itself, the stage is the piece. But yes, I think it's very interesting as an artistic approach. But what makes a piece, a performance, a piece of work is a different question. Okay, time-wise, can we take another question? Maybe this is an open-ended question. You were focusing on IP, intellectual property, but what about everything we talked about this morning? What is the meaning of authorship, of writing? Martin, you talked about this being your writing, so there's the idea of protecting it, but what is a writing in your... what is your definition of writing, of authorship? We will end at 6:30, perhaps, with all of those questions, open-ended questions. So there's something that enables us to distinguish one piece from another. If I look at my trajectory, the different performances we created, some of them are quite conceptual. If we look at Le Repas, it's a culinary show under a big top. People come in, they wash their hands, they cook together, they dine, and they clean after themselves. And the show is ended when the last person leaves the big top. So we have the skeleton of the piece with the three-course meal with people who are living this experience. You have different objects coming from cooking, being together, conviviality. So the concept here is, isn't it more fun when we do all of this together? Isn't it the best party, the most successful party, when you slept there and you're still together the morning after? So this is a particular piece of writing very interesting in, and Pling Clang is a piece of cardboard that you open and something that you create that you then hang on the wall, something very confidential and intimate. So this is my definition of writing or authorship. I don't think there's one particular way of writing. Each performance, each piece has something very quintessential. Okay, well, this is the time now to show you our film, and it will be the conclusion of this panel discussion.
Archaos, parce qu'il y avait art et chaos, mais aussi parce qu'archaos, c'est comme archaïque, et ça veut dire, ça peut vouloir se traduire par celui qui arrive le premier à le savoir, donc le pouvoir. Et la coïncidence, c'est que nous, on voulait un mot qui commence par la lettre A pour être en début des listes. C'est drôle, hein?
Dans cette idée du premier, il y a l'idée de l'archive aussi, hein?
Alors, l'archive, pas encore. À ce moment-là, on disait surtout, on n'a que la mémoire du futur. C'était l'inverse, tu vois. Et on ne pensait pas justement à garder des ressources. Il se trouve que j'avais créé une société d'audiovisuel qui s'appelait Archaos Images, ce qui fait qu'on a des images. Ça, c'est Raquel.
Ah oui?
Ouais. À l'époque, ça a été un choc dans le monde du cirque et dans le monde du spectacle vivant. Pourquoi? Parce que il n'y avait rien qui existait comme ça. Et tout ce qui s'était fait dans le théâtre et dans la danse après les années 70 ne s'était pas fait dans le cirque. Et dans le cirque, nous, alors là on voit des extraits, mais on évoquait l'emprise des religions, la violence, la sexualité, enfin, tout ce qui concerne les contemporains, quoi. Et c'était un choc terrible pour la société. Ça faisait scandale. The Last Show on Earth, on a reçu The Best Name en Grande-Bretagne. The Best Name, c'était le prix de la meilleure proposition artistique de l'année en Grande-Bretagne. Et un cirque a eu ça en 1989. Et ce qui fait que ça a lancé un peu une médiatisation internationale, mondiale du cirque, de ce qu'on appelait le nouveau cirque. Truc incroyable. C'est que quand tu donnes un truc comme ça, tout le monde peut s'en servir. Donc assez vite quand même, voilà, à peu près à partir de 1994-95, pour nous on a commencé à penser au fait que quelqu'un pourrait reprendre des choses. Moi, personnellement, au départ, c'est surtout l'écriture qui me préoccupe. Hein. C'est comment on peut théoriser, en tout cas, sur l'écriture du cirque. Pour moi, il est nécessaire qu'il y ait une écriture au préalable, c'est-à-dire poser les idées hein, avant de poser la forme par-dessus. Voilà. Et donc, ce que j'appelle l'écriture préalable. Et comme vous avez vu, on a monté des très grosses formes. Et en fait, en plus ça avait un côté pratique pour moi, ça veut dire que le scénario était une bible pour tout le monde. Hein. Raquel pensait tout de suite au répertoire, à cette idée de « je veux la bibliothèque de cirque ». Ce n'était pas une préoccupation pour moi, tant et si bien que tout se faisait sur des feuilles volantes, des cahiers qu'on oubliait. On n'a que la mémoire du futur, voilà, le passé ne nous intéresse pas de toute façon. Et en plus on disait, nous on ne veut surtout pas voir de spectacle parce qu'on ne veut pas être influencé, quoi. On ne veut rien savoir de ce qui existe. Voilà, on était bien barrés quand même. Et elle, par rapport à la notion de répertoire, quand elle est arrivée à l'école de cirque, à Rio, elle a dit « Où est la bibliothèque de cirque ?» On lui a dit « Mais de quoi tu parles ?» Elle dit ben, « Moi, je veux interpréter des personnages de cirque. Moi, je viens du théâtre, donc c'est mon boulot d'être interprète, donc je veux la bibliothèque de cirque. » On lui a dit ben, « Ça n'existe pas. » Et elle m'a dit après, mon désir de venir en France, c'était aussi de rencontrer la bibliothèque de cirque. Et quand elle est arrivée à Paris, elle allait à Beaubourg pour chercher la bibliothèque de cirque. En fait, elle n'a pas trouvé grand-chose, évidemment. Et voilà, et donc c'était sa quête.
Oui.
Et c'est comme ça qu'on s'est rencontrés, elle et moi, sur cette chose-là d'écriture et de répertoire. Donc c'est vieux. On va rester sur in vitro. Donc 10 ans après, en 2009, on décide donc de recréer 2 versions de celui qui avait été créé donc à cette époque-là. Alors, une version est dite à l'identique parce qu'on utilise le même tunnel, là, hein, voilà, les arches d'origine, le même décor, les mêmes costumes et les mêmes musiques. Et on donne ça à un metteur en scène italien, Dries Vanwalle. Et Raquel et moi, en même temps, là on est à Rio, à l'École nationale de cirque de Rio, sur 2 sites différents. En même temps, Raquel et moi, on réécrit donc une autre version d'après le scénario d'origine, mais en réécrivant une autre scénographie. Parce qu'on voulait, montrer que travailler sur le répertoire, c'était normal, quoi. Enfin, on voulait nous montrer l'exemple, en tout cas. Parce que j'avais essayé de proposer à quelqu'un de remonter un autre spectacle, mais les gens n'étaient pas prêts pour que quelqu'un d'autre monte un spectacle de quelqu'un d'autre. Donc du coup, on a dit, bon, on va le faire nous-mêmes. Voilà. Et tu vois, j'avais tenté de créer une ligne pour le répertoire avec cette société d'auteurs et le ministère de la Culture. J'ai presque réussi. Ils étaient OK de créer une ligne budgétaire pour ça, mais d'aide à la reprise. Mais en fait, notre milieu à nous n'était pas prêt. Les artistes disaient beaucoup, non mais attends, on n'a pas assez d'argent pour faire des créations, tu vas pas prendre de l'argent pour des reprises, c'est absurde, etc. C'est intéressant, hein? J'étais au Festival des Jonglages, donc avec Vincent Béraud, et je suis assis à côté d'Andrea, donc qui voit le travail de reprise donc, de son travail d'origine.
It's not decided yet. Let's reformulate.
Et il était très concentré à côté de moi, vraiment comme ça, et je me demandais est-ce qu'il aime ou pas. Il était tellement comme ça, concentré, quoi, silencieux. Et à la fin, il a explosé. Il a explosé et je lui ai dit tu es content? Il m'a dit I'm very happy, it's fantastic, incredible.
My name is Andrea Salustri. I am an artist and I am part of the Sphere. My work, Materia, has been chosen to be reformulated by other 2 wonderful artists. The simple idea to, instead of protect, instead of shield your work from others, to please allow others to reformulate, to share the same practice and to grow upon each other. This is so much needed in circus.
Voilà, il était vraiment aux anges. Et là, je suis allé voir Vincent et je lui ai dit ça. Je lui ai dit, tu sais, c'était vraiment beau sa réaction. Et c'est là où j'ai dit à Vincent, tu sais que nous, on prépare un appel à projet sur la reprise de répertoire. Il m'a dit, ah bon, bah, tiens-moi au courant, tu sais, voilà, il me raconte l'histoire de The Sphere, parce que j'avais un tout petit peu entendu en entrant au spectacle, mais vraiment très peu. Et donc là, je rentre à Marseille, je raconte à Raquel, et Raquel me dit, bon, on sort tout de suite l'appel à projet, faire revivre. Voilà l'histoire. De dire, on va créer le plus gros festival de cirque du monde. Parce que j'adore ces slogans, comme ça frappe. Et tout le monde a dit, non, il ne faut pas faire ça, on ne va pas y aller. C'est pas possible, on ne suit plus les festivals, voilà, on ne crée rien, c'est pas possible. Et moi, j'ai dit, on vous prévient, tout ce qu'on dit, on le fait.
So, thanks everyone for sticking with us until the end of today. A big thanks to all the speakers that were with us and that accepted to come and share their thoughts with us. A big thank you to all the people in the room for contributing as well on all these roundtables. I can tell you that in a few days, the whole conference will be available online on the Circus Next YouTube channel. It will be available in English, 100%, and also in French. So we'll pass on this information to the French speakers who missed out today. A big thank you to, again, to Théâtre de la Cité Internationale for hosting us, and to our teams.
Yeah. You said everything. Yeah, a big thank to everyone. So it was a wonderful day. You can say that. Yeah, wonderful.
Little practical request that passed on to me. Can you all bring your cups back upstairs? Apparently, it's important, right? Yeah. And now, for those who are here in the room with us, we are going to have a little apéritif in the end. Oh, my colleagues are saying your headsets also at the entrance, les casques à l'entrée. Il faut les remettre, les casques de traduction. So we're going to go for a little apéritif. Thanks again for all of those who were online with us also today. Thanks again to our translators, our technicians of the day. So that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.